Maria McDonald didn't remember deciding to run. She remembered the weight of lace on her shoulders, the way her mother's hands had trembled while fastening the last pearl button. Not from nerves but from urgency. As if the ceremony were a deadline she feared missing more than her daughter's breaking point. The room had smelled of roses and incense, thick enough to choke. Every mirror reflected a girl dressed for celebration, yet her eyes looked hollow, already gone. So she walked. Out of the house. Out of the future written for her. Barefoot on stone streets that cut into her skin. Wedding dress gathered in her fists like stolen evidence. No carriage followed. No one noticed. They never did when she obeyed, why would they now? The Silvermeyer Bridge rose ahead, pale and ancient, its arches cutting into the mist like ribs. It had always been there, separating the known from the forbidden, human land from vampire territory. A place whispered about, never lingered on. Cross quickly. Don't look down. Maria stopped at the center. Below her, the river churned through the Shadowfin Gorge, black and endless, swallowing sound. The wind tugged at her veil, playful, coaxing. She thought of the vows she hadn't spoken yet. Of the man waiting at the altar who smiled as if she were a prize already won. Of a life measured in obedience and silence. Her hands moved before her fear could catch up. Stone railing. Cold beneath her palms. A swing of fabric. For a breathless second, she balanced on the edge where centuries of desperate souls had stood before her, each believing they were alone in their despair. Then she stepped forward. The fall was violent and quiet all at once. Air ripped past her ears, stole what little breath she had left. The bridge vanished above, the world narrowing to wind and darkness. There was no regret, only relief sharp enough to ache. And then, stillness. Her stomach lurched as motion ceased too suddenly to be real. Something solid wrapped around her, anchoring her in a way gravity never had. Maria gasped, fingers clawing at unfamiliar fabric as her body shook with delayed terror. She didn't open her eyes at first. She was afraid that if she did, the illusion would break and she'd be falling again. But a voice cut through the chaos, low and even, unshaken by the impossible. You're safe now. I promise you you're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign, fragile. Dangerous. She forced her eyes open. A man, no something more, held her suspended above the abyss. His arms were steady, effortless, as though her weight meant nothing at all. His face was pale in the moonlight, sharp and composed, eyes dark with an intelligence that had watched centuries pass without blinking. Behind him stretched the land beyond the bridge. Vast, shadowed, alive with a power that hummed against her skin. She realized then that she hadn't been saved by chance. She had been caught by intention. And whatever future waited for her now was no longer the one her family had chosen. The bridge loomed above them, silent witness to the life she had left behind. Maria clutched his coat, breath trembling. The night held its breath with her. Chapter 2, Sanctuary. Maria didn't remember crossing the distance from the bridge to solid ground. One moment the abyss yawned beneath her feet. The next her boots, no her bare feet, touched stone that was warm despite the night. The vampire king set her down with care, as if she were something fragile rather than a woman who had just tried to vanish from the world. Her knees buckled anyway. He caught her again, this time slower, grounding her. Not restraining. Not claiming. Simply steadying. You won't fall, he said, as if stating a law rather than offering comfort. The land around them was nothing like the stories. No screaming winds. No blood-soaked battlements. Instead, the vampire territory unfolded in dark elegance. Rolling hills dusted with silver grass, torchlight glowing along a road that curved toward distant spires. A castle rose beyond the fog, ancient and deliberate, carved into the mountain as if it had grown there. Maria hugged herself, shivering now that the shock was fading. Her wedding dress was torn at the hem, damp with mist and river spray. She felt foolish in it here, exposed and out of place. You crossed the border, the king said. No one forced you. I didn't know where I was going, she whispered. That doesn't make it less a choice. She looked up at him then. Up close he was terrifying in a quiet way, too still, too composed. His presence pressed against her senses, not threatening but vast, like standing at the edge of a storm that hadn't decided whether to break. I can't go back, she said quickly. The words tumbled out raw and panicked. They'll make me. They always do. I won't return you, he replied. The certainty in his voice startled her more than the promise itself. Maria searched his face for the hidden cost. A bargain. A debt. There was always a price. Why? She asked. You don't know me. His gaze didn't waver. I know enough. He gestured toward the road. Shadows stirred at the edges of the torchlight. Figures watching, waiting. Vampires, she realized, holding their distance with disciplined restraint. This is my domain, he continued. Within it, no one owns you. Not your family. Not your husband. Not even me. Her breath caught. The words felt unreal, dangerous in their hope. What happens to people who come here? She asked. They are given what they were denied, he said. Safety. Time. Choice. And if I decide to leave? Then you will leave. No chains. No threats. No velvet lies. Maria's hands trembled as she reached up and loosened the veil pinned into her hair. It slid free, drifting to the ground like shed skin. For the first time that night, the weight on her chest eased. Not gone but lighter. She nodded once. The Vampire King inclined his head in acknowledgement, not triumph. Then come, he said. The night is cold, and you have survived enough for one evening. As they began walking toward the castle, Maria glanced back at the bridge, barely visible through the mist. She didn't feel regret. Only the fragile, terrifying beginning of relief. Chapter 3: Burning the Dress. The room they gave her was quiet in a way Maria had never known. Not the tense quiet of waiting to be corrected, or the brittle silence that followed raised voices, but something deeper. Intentional. The chamber overlooked the valley, moonlight spilling across stone floors and dark wood furniture worn smooth by centuries of use. A fire burned low in the hearth, its warmth steady, patient. Maria stood in the center of the room, alone for the first time without fear. Her wedding dress clung to her, damp and heavy, its once ivory silk stained with mist, dirt and river spray. It smelled faintly of roses and smoke and everything she had been running from. She tugged at the laces with shaking fingers until the bodice loosened, then let the gown fall to the floor in a pale heap. Without it, she felt strangely exposed. Smaller. Real. She wrapped her arms around herself and laughed once, a quiet, breathless sound that surprised her. The laugh dissolved into a shaky exhale. She pressed a hand to her mouth, grounding herself, and looked at the dress again. It had never been hers. It was her mother's relief. Her father's bargain. A symbol stitched with obedience and expectation. Every pearl a reminder of silence learned early and practiced well. The fire crackled softly as if listening. Maria gathered the fabric in her arms and carried it to the hearth. For a long moment she hesitated. Burning it felt final. Not dramatic, just irrevocable. As if the ashes would mark something she could never return to, even if she wanted to. Good. She fed the hem into the flames. The silk caught slowly at first, curling and darkening, then flared with sudden hunger. The fire consumed lace and satin alike, pearls popping faintly as they split from the heat. Smoke rose, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of endings. Maria watched until the last scrap collapsed into glowing embers. Her chest tightened, not with grief but with release. When the door opened, she startled, spinning toward the sound. The Vampire King stood in the doorway, his presence filling the space without intruding. His gaze flicked to the hearth, then back to her face. You didn't have to do that, he said calmly. I did, she replied. Her voice was steadier than she expected. If I kept it, I would keep thinking it meant something. And now it doesn't get to decide who I am. A pause. Then, something like approval softened his expression. Names matter here, he said after a moment. If you wish to give one, I will use it. She blinked. You don't already know? I chose not to look. The choice struck her harder than the flames had. Maria, she said. Maria MacDonald. He inclined his head. Then Maria MacDonald, you are a guest under my protection. No claim will be made on you. No debt assumed. What do I owe you? She asked quietly. Nothing, he said. Survival is not a transaction. The fire burned low between them, warm and alive. Maria drew a deep breath, feeling something unfamiliar settle into her bones. Not safety, not yet. But space. And for the first time that felt like enough. Chapter 4. Learning to breathe. Maria woke to light instead of orders. It filtered through tall windows and pale bands, touching stone and fabric without urgency. For a disoriented moment, she waited for the familiar jolt of panic, the sense that she had overslept, misstepped, failed some invisible expectation. It didn't come. The room was still. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, warm but quiet. Her body ached in small, honest ways, the kind that came from tension finally releasing. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and listened. Nothing demanded her attention. A soft knock came at the door. Not sharp, not insistent. She startled anyway. "Maria," a voice said from the other side. Not commanding. Asking. "May I enter?" She swallowed. "Yes." The door opened to reveal a woman she hadn't seen before. Dark-haired, sharp-eyed, dressed in simple but elegant clothing. Human, Maria realized with a flicker of surprise. "I'm Elaine," the woman said. "I help new arrivals settle." New arrivals. The words implied a pattern. Place for people like her. Elaine brought food, bread still warm, fruit cut neatly, tea that smelled faintly of herbs. She placed the tray within reach and waited, not watching too closely, not turning away either. Maria's hands trembled as she lifted the cup. "It's all right," Elaine said gently. "No one is timing you." Maria let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She took a sip. The warmth spread through her chest, loosening something knotted deep inside. After breakfast, Elaine showed her the castle. Not all of it, just enough. Corridors that curved instead of confined. Windows instead of walls. Rooms where people worked, studied, spoke softly together. Vampires and humans moved through the space with an ease that felt practiced, intentional. No one stared. No one asked why she was there. "This is a sanctuary," Elaine said as they paused near a balcony overlooking the valley. "That doesn't mean it's painless. But it is chosen." Chosen. Maria leaned against the stone railing, breathing in cool air laced with pine and night-blooming flowers. Her heartbeat slowed, syncing with the quiet rhythm of the place. She realized then how shallow her breaths had always been, how carefully she had rationed air as if taking too much might cost her something. Here no one corrected her posture. No one told her to smile. Later, she found herself alone in a small library, fingers tracing spines of books she'd never been allowed to touch. History. Philosophy. Languages. She opened one at random and sat on the floor, back against a shelf, reading without permission. Hours passed unnoticed. When the Vampire King appeared in the doorway, she didn't jump. "You're breathing differently," he observed. She glanced up, startled. "Is that bad?" "No," he said. "It means you're beginning to believe you're allowed to exist." The words settled into her quietly. Maria closed the book, pressing it to her chest. Not possessive, just grateful. For the first time, she wasn't counting the minutes until something was taken away. She inhaled deeply. And this time she didn't rush to let the air go. Chapter 5. The Castle of Refuge. Maria began to notice the others. Not all at once. At first, they were just faces passing in corridors, silhouettes framed by candlelight, voices drifting from rooms she hadn't yet entered. But as days settled into something resembling routine, the patterns emerged. A young man with ink-stained fingers who spent hours translating old texts, pausing only to smile shyly when she passed. A woman with a scar along her jaw who trained in the courtyard at dawn. Her movements precise, controlled, free. Children who laughed too loudly, as if daring the world to stop them. All of them had crossed the bridge. The realization came slowly, then all at once. She wasn't an exception. She was part of something deliberate. Elaine introduced her to the common hall. A wide space warmed by long tables and conversation. Humans and vampires ate together. Not in careful, segregated silence, but in easy clusters. Power here didn't isolate itself. It observed. It listened. "This place wasn't built overnight," Elaine said quietly, handing Maria a bowl of stew. "Most sanctuaries aren't." Maria took a seat near the end of the table, unsure of her place. Someone slid a cup toward her without comment. Another asked if she preferred more bread or less. The simplicity of the choices made her throat tighten. Later, in the gardens, she met a girl no older than 16 who had fled a noble house farther east. The girl spoke in clipped sentences at first, eyes darting as if expecting correction. Then, gradually she relaxed, voice warming as she talked about learning mathematics for the first time. "They let me ask questions here," the girl said, almost in wonder. "Even stupid ones." "There are no stupid questions," Maria said automatically, then paused, surprised. She'd never been allowed to believe that herself. As twilight settled, Maria wandered the outer walls alone. From here the bridge was visible in the distance, a pale thread against the dark. She thought of how final it had seemed from the center, how small it looked now. The Vampire King joined her without announcement. "You see it now," he said. She nodded. "This isn't just a castle." "No," he agreed. "It's a refusal." "A refusal of what?" "Of the idea that suffering is inevitable." She turned to him. "You built this." "I protected it," he corrected. "Others shaped it. I only ensured it endured." Maria studied his profile, the stillness, the restraint, the weight of centuries carried without spectacle. "Why?" He met her gaze. "Because power that only consumes eventually starves." The answer lingered with her long after he left. That night, Maria lay awake listening to the quiet hum of life beyond her door. For the first time, she wasn't measuring her worth by how well she disappeared. She was beginning to understand what it meant to belong without being owned. And the castle, ancient and watchful, seemed to breathe with her. Chapter 6. Love with an expiration date. Maria realized she was falling again long before she admitted it. This fall was quieter. No wind tearing at her skin. No stone rushing up to meet her. It arrived in small moments she kept trying to dismiss. Shared silences on the battlements. The way Carl Cromwell listened as if her thoughts mattered before she finished speaking. How the weight of his attention never pressed, only steadied. She told herself it was gratitude. That was easier. They spent evenings walking the outer paths of the castle, where the world fell away into dark valleys and starlit sky. He spoke of borders and treaties, of centuries spent preventing wars that would never be sung about. She spoke of books she was devouring, questions she'd never been allowed to ask, ideas that startled her with their own boldness. He never corrected her. One night, she asked the question she had been circling for weeks. "How long have you been alive?" He stopped walking. The pause was answer enough. "Longer than your kingdom has existed," he said. "Longer than the language you speak." Her chest tightened. "And how long will you live?" "Unless something kills me," he replied evenly. "I will continue." The space between them shifted, heavy with what went unsaid. "I won't," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "You won't." The honesty of it hurt more than a lie ever could. Maria turned away, gripping the stone railing. Below, the lights of the sanctuary glimmered. Proof of lives unfolding, fragile and finite. "Then this, whatever this is, it can't be fair." "I never promised fairness," Carl said quietly. "Only truth." She laughed softly, a sound etched with pain. "You saved me from the river, just to let time drown me anyway." He faced her fully now. "I saved you so you could choose how to live. Not so you could be spared from endings." The words settled into her. Heavy but clean. She looked at him, then really looked. At the restraint etched into every still line of him. At the care it must take to love something breakable when you yourself are not. "Why do you let yourself feel anything at all?" "Because numbness is another kind of death," he said. "And I have endured enough of those." Silence wrapped around them, not empty but charged. Maria stepped closer, close enough to feel the cold of his skin through his coat, close enough that fear and longing blurred together. "This will hurt," she said. "Yes," he answered. "And you'll survive it." "I always do." The truth of that was what finally broke her. She pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing in the unfamiliar scent of night air and stone. He didn't move to hold her. Not until she nodded, a small, decisive motion. Then his arms came around her, careful and complete. The embrace wasn't a promise. It was an acceptance. And for the first time, Maria chose love knowing exactly how it would end. Chapter 7. The Gates of Reckoning. The summons came at dawn. Maria was in the lower hall, helping sort books newly arrived from the western provinces, when the air shifted, tight, expectant. Conversations stilled. Footsteps echoed with purpose. Elaine appeared at her side, expression grave but steady. "They've come," she said. Maria didn't need to ask who. From the battlements she saw them gathered at the outer gates. Banners stiff in the morning wind, armor catching the light. At their center stood her father, rigid and pale with fury, and beside him the man she had been promised to, Lord Brennan, his smile thin with entitlement. Her chest tightened, old instincts surging. Hide. Apologize. Comply. She stayed where she was. They're demanding your return, Elaine said quietly. They're invoking treaties. Old ones. Maria's hands shook. She pressed them together, grounding herself in the feel of the stone floor beneath her feet. If I go back. You won't, Carl's voice said behind her. She turned. He stood composed as ever, dark coat fastened, crown absent but authority unmistakable. This is your choice, he said. But you won't face them alone. The gates opened with a sound like thunder. Maria stepped forward first. Her father's eyes widened when he saw her. Alive, standing tall, unchained. Rage replaced shock almost instantly. Maria, he barked. You've embarrassed us enough. Come home. Home. The word felt hollow now. I won't, she said. Her voice carried, clear and steady. I am not your property. Lord Brennan scoffed. You belong to me by contract. Carl moved then, placing himself beside her. Not in front. Never in front. No contract signed under coercion is valid in my domain, he said calmly. You may leave. This is human business, her father snapped. And she is under my protection, Carl replied. The air seemed to hum around him, power restrained but unmistakable. Which makes it mine. Maria drew a breath, deep and unhurried. You taught me obedience, she said to her father. You never taught me worth. I learned that here. His face twisted. You think this monster cares about you? She didn't look at Carl when she answered. I think he gave me a choice. You never did. Silence rippled through both crowds, human soldiers and sanctuary residents alike. The truth hung there, undeniable. Her father opened his mouth again. Maria raised her hand. I am staying, she said. And if you return it will be as guests or not at all. For a moment war seemed inevitable. Then her father turned away, fury burning into something like fear. The banners retreated. The gates closed. Only when they were gone did Maria's legs threaten to give out. Carl steadied her with a light touch at her elbow. You chose yourself, he said. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. Not from loss but from relief. The reckoning was over. And she had won. Chapter 8, Building Something Bigger. The work did not arrive all at once. It began quietly, the way most lasting things do. Maria started in the library, answering questions from newcomers who hovered uncertainly at the shelves, hands clasped as if knowledge might bite. She showed them how to find what they needed, how to ask for more, how to sit with confusion without apologizing for it. Soon people began seeking her out. A woman from the northern marshes who wanted to learn numbers, so she could never be cheated again. A boy who had crossed the bridge alone and refused to speak, but listened intently as Maria read aloud each evening. Former nobles, former servants, former fugitives, all unlearning what they had been taught to endure. You explain things differently, Elaine observed one night, watching a small group gathered around Maria in the garden. You don't just teach facts. Maria smiled faintly. I teach permission. Carl listened from a distance. He never interfered, never redirected. When she asked for space, he gave it. When she asked for resources, they appeared. Empty wings of the castle transformed into classrooms, workshops, planning halls. Messengers carried letters outward, carefully coded, inviting others to cross, not in desperation but with intent. Sanctuaries began to form beyond the castle. Small at first. A manor repurposed. A monastery opened its gates. Safe houses threaded through hostile territories, protected not by force, but by alliances Carl had spent centuries cultivating. Maria helped design them, how they would function, who they would protect, how choice would remain central. No ownership, she insisted. Ever. Carl nodded. Then it will endure. They walked together less now. Their evenings replaced by work that pulled them in different directions. And yet, when they did meet, late nights over maps and candlelight, brief conversations stolen between obligations, the connection remained. Quiet. Certain. Time, however, was not subtle. Lines etched themselves gently at the corners of Maria's eyes. Her hair threaded with silver. Carl never changed. The contrast was stark, impossible to ignore. One evening, she caught him watching her with an expression she recognized too well. "Don't mourn me while I'm still here," she said softly. "I don't," he replied. "I witness." She took his hand warm against his cold. "Then witness this." Years passed. Maria's name traveled farther than she ever had. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a builder. A woman who turned escape into structure, survival into system. When she finally slowed, when her body demanded rest she no longer denied, the sanctuaries stood on their own. People led who had once arrived broken and silent. On her last morning, Maria watched the valley from the same balcony where she had first understood belonging. "I didn't just survive," she said quietly. "I mattered." Carl stood beside her, eternal and unshielded. "Yes," he said. "You changed the world." And she believed him. Chapter 9: Finite Love, Infinite Legacy. Maria died in the early hours of morning, as light crept gently over the valley. There was no pain, no struggle, only the slow, honest fading of a body that had been used fully and well. Carl sat beside her, her hand resting in his, warm even as the rest of her cooled. He did not speak. Words would have been an intrusion. She had asked him not to. Her breathing softened, then stilled, like a tide that had finally reached its farthest shore. The world did not break. The castle did not cry out. Life continued quietly, respectfully, because she had built it that way. Carl closed her eyes. For the first time in centuries he did not move when the sun rose. The sanctuary mourned without spectacle. There were no banners, no declarations of loss. Instead, classrooms opened. Meals were shared. Children laughed in gardens she had planted. People lived the lives she had fought to make possible. Maria was laid to rest overlooking the valley, beneath a tree grown from seeds carried across borders by hand. Carl stood alone when the last stone was placed, his expression unreadable, his grief deep and unperformative. Time passed. Kingdoms shifted. Borders redrew themselves. The bridge remained, ancient and watchful. Carl endured. He watched sanctuaries multiply, change, adapt. He corrected nothing unless asked. He protected without ruling. When people spoke Maria's name, it was not with reverence, but with gratitude. The highest honor she would have wanted. On quiet nights, Carl returned to the bridge. He stood where she had once stepped forward, where despair had turned into choice. He remembered the weight of her in his arms, the way she had learned to breathe, to love, to build. He did not wish for her return. She had never been meant to last forever. Epilogue: The Crossing. Long after Maria became a story told to newcomers, a young woman stood on the Silvermere Bridge at midnight, trembling in the wind. She did not jump. She waited. Epilogue: The Crossing. Long after Maria became a story told to newcomers, a young woman stood on the Silvermere Bridge at midnight, trembling in the wind. She did not jump. She waited. Footsteps sounded behind her. Calm, unhurried. "You're safe," a familiar voice said, steady as winter. "And you have a choice." The bridge stretched between worlds. And the legacy crossed it again.